I have been fished by a really complex gang who,
Really?
almost convinced me into doing really bad stuff. I did not want to be an entrepreneur. Unlike many people who start a startup, their goal is to start a company. But for me, I wasn't driven by the fact that I want to start a company, and hence I started Zania. But what truly changed for me is I led AI efforts at Microsoft. Like in the early days, we wanted to not just build something in isolation, we wanted to work with awesome customers who are serious about what we are building and really learn with them and build something. So we kept getting these customers in the risk and compliance space. While we wanted to build something, the market was really pulling us to build something else. So the average myth in the valley is that Vanta Trada have won the compliance space. And,
Okay.
Even though I've been in security, even I had that myth, I was like, oh, like, why would I build a company in this space? But then I realized that the way small companies do compliance is very different than how an enterprise needs to do compliance. Having learned from Brian Chesky, who founded Airbnb,
Yes.
I'm used to building products that people love. I want them to feel happy after using the product. For a risk and compliance or a security software, I want them to use it less. I don't want them to use it more.
Welcome to Build and Beyond. Our guest today is Shruti Gupta. She is the founder of Zania, an AI cybersecurity startup based out of the Bay Area that focuses on automating governance, risk, and compliance for companies of all sizes. She has headed security at OpenDNS, which was acquired by Cisco. She was the founding security officer at top startups in the Bay Area such as Airbnb, Instacart, and Brex, and most recently served as the chief information security officer at Microsoft Identity. Shruti, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sam. Really happy to be here.
So, Shruti, you set up the security programs at Instacart in 2018, Airbnb in 2015, and OpenDNS in 2012. Can you tell us about how you came across these opportunities? How did you get connected to the founders? What were the big challenges that Brian or Brandon wanted you to focus on? What was the threat landscape like at the time?
Yeah, that's an amazing question. So I think earlier on in my journey, when I went to school at Georgia Tech, I didn't really have a reputation, a network, right? So the first couple of years were really me working hard, learning things, growing, and really building my reputation as a security engineer, where people would say, we've seen Shruti's work. Luckily, security is a very small industry. So you know a lot of people. It's not like if you're a software engineer, there's like lots of software engineers, right? So I spent a couple of years really doing, learning a lot, building my reputation. And then one of my mentors actually introduced me to Airbnb. And that's how I got connected to the Airbnb leadership team. And it was just an amazing opportunity. At the time, Airbnb and Uber were the cutting edge startups in the valley. So I was just really lucky to get that opportunity. It just clicked really, really well with what I wanted to do and what I'd done before.
Hmm. And what were the big challenges that they wanted you to focus on? I'm trying to understand, I'm trying to gauge what did the security landscape look like at the time? So what did they want you to focus on?
Yeah, definitely. So, when a company is growing really fast and there's no security, you have to come in and really enable the product and engineering teams to secure the products as well as grow fast, right? Security needs to be an enabler rather than like a big company where security puts in the red tape. So the biggest challenge was to actually have meaningful security without slowing the team down. And, I've built security programs from the ground up at many of my companies like Instacart, Airbnb. And usually, like, when you come in, the company doesn't really have a security muscle. So they don't even know much about, hey, how do we practically get started? What is good enough, right? So a lot of it is like technical security, but then a lot of it is the cultural aspects of setting in the right processes, working with the leadership team, getting the right alignments in place, and of course, like doing, core security engineering work to really safeguard the systems in place.
So is that one of the reasons why you decided to choose GRC as a problem to solve? Like out of all the security problems you could have gone after, perhaps like even managed services, what made this one feel extremely urgent and underbuilt for? Why did you see this space? And what did you see in it that was so broken? And what made you say now is the time to build this?
Yeah, definitely. So, funnily, I did not want to be an entrepreneur. Unlike many people who start a startup, their goal is to start a company. But for me, I wasn't driven by the fact that I want to start a company, and hence I started Zania. But what truly changed for me is I led AI efforts at Microsoft, and I
Correct.
just saw massive differences in when you use AI and when you don't, and what the ROI is. For example, I had a team of 14 principal architects, and the amount of work they did in 9 months, our AI could do in a day, and beat the humans just because the scale is so massive, right? And when I saw those kinds of gains at Microsoft, I was just blown away, with how the world is can really change the status quo, how security can truly become empowered rather than always, lagging behind trying to catch up because there's so much to do. So that was my aha moment where I was like, I've
Ah.
seen this thing. It works really, really well. And, there's not a lot of people that can truly build something great in this space and, in the AI security space, because you truly need someone who's an expert in AI and an expert in security and someone who has really great product thinking, who has lived this problem, who knows how to solve these problems to really come together and solve this problem for others. And I felt I had, unique skills because of living this problem for 15 years, having built AI products, really having like design thinking from my days from Airbnb. I think all of that really helped me feel confident that I could be uniquely positioned to build something. And I was really excited about that. And that's when I left Microsoft to start Zania.
Yeah. That was going to be my next question. So, can you tell us what Zania is? What does it do, and what sets it apart?
Yeah, definitely. So
Yeah.
I think, if you look at the responsibilities of a security team, there's broadly three categories or three hierarchy of needs, if you may put it that way. The first one is GRC, or risk and compliance. Every business in the world, every enterprise in the world needs to be compliant. Otherwise, you just can't do business. It's enforced by regulators, it's enforced by customers. That's how they build trust. So amongst the hierarchy of needs that a security team needs to fulfill is the core pillar is compliance, because that's, the number one business need. And then there's security and then privacy. And if you look at modern innovation, there's been so much innovation in the security space, but very little in the compliance space, and even more little in the privacy space. And I when I started Zania, I actually wanted to start a company in like the pure security engineering space and not like the risk and
Really?
compliance space. And like in the early days, we wanted to not just build something in isolation. We wanted to work with awesome customers who are serious about what we are building and really learn with them and build something. So we kept getting these customers in the risk and compliance space. While we wanted to build something, the market was really pulling us to build something else. And for a while, we had this almost like an imposter syndrome of, hey, we're just doing this for the learnings and for revenue, but we actually want to start this other company, right? So we had like a dual identity crisis almost in the early days. But a few months in, we decided that, this space was crazy. There's if you're familiar with this space, or if someone's familiar with the space, there's a couple of companies like Vantage Rara. They've raised a ton of money. They've been really successful in the startup space. They help startups or SMBs get a certificate which helps them sell more. So the average myth in the valley is that Vantage Rara have won the compliance space. And
Okay.
even though I've been in security, even I had that myth. I was like, oh, like why would I build a company in this space? But then I realized that the way small companies do compliance is very different than how an enterprise needs to do compliance. So up until you're at the mid-market stage,
Hmm.
You can actually use a simplistic product that is based on rules. It checks the
Hmm.
box, it gets you the certificate. But as
Hmm.
soon as you become like a multi-unicorn,
Yeah.
your organizational complexity and technology
Increases.
stack
Hmm.
for an
Hmm.
SMB, you can have a simple hard-coded checklist of things that you can keep checking for a certain kind of a company, and you can get your
Hmm.
certificate. But
Hmm.
as you become a multi-unicorn and an enterprise, you cannot actually follow that checklist, because
Hmm.
at the point, the organizational complexity, the technology stack,
Hmm.
as well as the kind of things an auditor expects from you, the difficulty in meeting these regulatory requirements becomes too complex to follow a
Hmm.
checkbox approach. And at
Hmm.
that point, when you're an enterprise, you actually have software that helps you track compliance tasks and assign it
Hmm.
to various people in the company. But then the
Hmm.
actual work of executing on those tasks is purely human. And every
Hmm.
enterprise spends millions of dollars a year
Hmm.
either hiring a consulting firm,
Hmm.
someone like a Deloitte, a KPMG to do this, or they have large internal teams doing all of this compliance work manually. And when I realized that, that was like a crazy,
Hmm.
crazy aha moment for me, because that's like a huge opportunity. Hundreds of
Hmm.
billions of dollars are being spent on all of this
Hmm.
work that gets done manually. And AI is
Hmm.
really amazing at solving
Hmm.
this problem.
Hmm.
There's nobody else solving this problem. And that's when, that was about 6 months ago when we
Hmm.
realized that, wow, we really need to focus on just risk and compliance. Really, when the enterprise space in the risk and compliance category,
Hmm.
there's pretty much, no one doing it. And since we started working on it, it's just been crazy. So
Hmm.
Zania, what we do is that we build AI agents that can execute on risk and compliance tasks. So, for
Hmm.
example, if a team of 5 to 10 people would take 4 months to solve a particular compliance challenge, a compliance task, then our AI agents can actually accomplish tasks such as doing risk assessments, doing compliance gap assessments, doing, M&A security reviews. All of these tasks that take months of manual work, our AI can actually perform those tasks in a few minutes, in as little
Hmm.
as 30 seconds. Depends
Hmm.
on the complexity of the task, but anywhere from a few seconds to a few minutes. And
Hmm.
then the humans actually start with 70 to 80% of the work already done for them. And then at that point, they're just reviewing and refining AI's work, but they're not having to do all of this grunt back of the office work
Hmm.
manually. And that gives them huge growth opportunities. It gives them a great opportunity to, one, increase the compliance posture, increase the revenue growth of their company, not do boring work, have higher
Hmm.
accuracy, have cost savings. It's just a
Hmm.
win-win.
Hmm.
And since we've started, it's just been crazy. We have a lot of amazing customers, top enterprises like Stanford, Plaid,
Hmm.
Remedy, Grant Thornton, many others.
Hmm.
We just closed our seven-figure ARR contract a couple of weeks ago, and we've
Wow.
just started
Hmm.
building it, 6 months ago. So it's just really overwhelming to,
Hmm.
have such a great product market fit.
Interesting, interesting. So, since Zania is all about AI agents, I think my next question should be about that as well. Everyone's talking about how AI agents and how 2025 is the year of the AI agent. I would love for you to explain for the audience what are AI agents really, and how different are they in terms of capability.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. So, since the time I started working on AI, a couple of years ago, um, there's various complexities and autonomy of what an AI system is capable of. A couple of years ago, if I just talk about generative AI,
Sure.
it started with prompt engineering, then retrieval augmented generation, now AI agents, and the capabilities and the sophistication in terms of what an AI agent could deliver is just increasing, right? It's able to take
Hmm.
on more and more complex and autonomous tasks. So
Hmm.
right now, the AI, like the term agent it has a very specific meaning. It
Hmm.
basically means a piece of AI system
Hmm.
that can create a step-by-step plan and execute on the plan with the tools and training available to it. It's not as, it's not as dumb as just like answering questions or, doing a basic task. It can actually execute a series of tasks like a human does. So that's what, an AI agent does. Now, we are like a, really fast learning company, and the AI landscape changes every month. Like pretty much one of the foundational companies comes up with an exponentially better way of building an AI system, or like a new groundbreaking thing that unlocks more capabilities in AI. And we are like right on top of, jumping on learning new stuff and seeing how our customers can really benefit from these AI advancements. So right now, what we see is that I'll talk about Zania. Like our AI agents are really like an expert. You could think of them as an AI consultant or somebody who really has expertise in GRC, because we've trained them with domain
Yep,
specific
yep, yep,
expertise.
yep. Mhm.
And, a year from now, what we are building towards is something that the technology allows now. With MCPs, you can orchestrate complex workflows without writing a bunch of code. So you could say like, hey, pull evidence from these 100 sources, perform, a GDPR assessment, tell me the gaps, file the gaps in Jira, ping the people who need to remediate these gaps, and if they don't remediate it, then escalate it to their manager. So such a complex workflow which requires many teams. You look up who's responsible for what, you open Jira, you create a ticket, you do an assessment, which in itself is like multiple months of work. All of these complex orchestration of workflows are also becoming possible from a GRC perspective. So that's what we are building towards, right? It would allow our AI to not just be a GRC expert, but to actually be an AI worker at an enterprise where it can do more than just beyond being an expert. Overall, things are like really, really crazy. We have one of our investors who leads research at Anthropic, and he
Interesting.
shares, crazy, crazy advancements that they're working on.
Can you share? A little bit more on that?
Yeah, definitely. So, like AI is already really, really smart. I feel like definitely even Chat GPT, it's way smarter than me for sure. I think it's hard to really beat a general purpose AI with general purpose knowledge. And it's really good at writing code. You have the human element to it. So building the next generation of AI is AI assisted, but by humans. But it looks like even large foundational companies um, in a year from now will be at a place where the next version of AI would be better built by an AI, and an AI would refine the AI. So it's just becoming more and more autonomous in that sense. And that just sounds crazy, right? Like an AI building the next version of the AI and refining it and, iterating on it, rather than a human saying like, hey, you're just my assistant, write code.
I think that's really interesting. The fact that you said, it's really interesting that you said that an AI iterating on an AI. So that was actually going to be my next question. Like, what are the possibilities of AI agents? Really, what can we go over some industries and use cases that will look totally different in the near future because of AI agents?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like in risk and compliance, I'm very close to that. There's not much that AI can't do. Like it can generate and manage your policies. It can tell you if you're compliant or not compliant with frameworks. It can perform complex assessments. Like if you're acquiring company for $30 billion, it can tell you what their security posture is. You know, it can do things that would otherwise take lots and lots of knowledge and lots of manual work pretty fast. And we see that, in most cases, RGRC is actually beating the world's best human experts.
Wow.
And we, we have a lot of like competitions internally, AI
Yeah.
versus humans, even with our customers where they do something their head of security or some like really some person who we really look up to does it, and then AI is often able to beat them, not because like AI is necessarily smarter, but these things are just so mind numbing. It's just so much manual work that
Yeah.
if you're doing so much of it, your mind kind of gets it's hard to focus for a human for so long. So overall, like I feel from what's possible, at least in the risk and compliance space, I don't see much which AI is not capable of doing in the
Correct.
sense from pure task perspective. But I think what AI is not really great at is the emotional piece, right? The
Of
strategic
course.
piece. It does not know strategically like how to really advise your company in a very personal manner. It's a little bit still at the robotic stage where it's missing that context, uh, as a
Interesting. Interesting.
machine.
So, I mean, you talked about how AI agents are transforming GRC, but surely it's probably going to be a double-edged sword, right? Like, I want to understand what this would mean for security at large, like both in terms of how it expands the attack surface and makes the threat landscape that much more vulnerable, and of course, as you mentioned in GRC, but also in terms of detection, response, and remediation.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that part's really scary because
Yeah.
like now AI technology has gotten so good, so sophisticated that it's really hard to find uh deep fakes. It's I have been fished by a really complex gang who,
Really?
almost convinced me into doing really bad stuff, and if I can get fooled, who's done security.
What kind of stuff?
So I got a call from this like fake FBI, and
Oh, okay, okay.
apparently I had gone to San Diego, Feb last year, and they somehow knew that, and they knew I rented a car from Avis, and they knew which
Okay.
hotel I stayed at. So I got a call from this pretend FBI saying that the car I rented has been found in another location where there's gangsters, and they even sent me a photo of
Wow.
money laundering and
Wow.
like weapons found, and they exactly knew which hotel I stayed at, on what date, what car I rented, from which representative, when I left, when I picked up the car, when I left it. They even actually spoke to me in Hindi, and they
Wow.
transferred me. So it
Wow.
was just crazy. And the number actually was being logged as SF, SF police department, which then transferred me to the FBI. So it was a really complex social engineering attack. And then a few days
Yes.
later, looked like it was some gang in Noida that was caught doing this thing. And it was just like really, I don't think like most people can, you know, and they did not want money from me, which is what it was not, you know, that clear. Like they just wanted my ID, not my money. So probably they were like using my voice to fabricate and then use it further. But it's just like all sorts of crazy stuff with AI becoming really good. People are able to
Yeah.
gather intelligence really, really well. Like it's much easier for me to now know about Sayam's life than it was earlier, right? I can make more personalized attacks. So as it's getting easier for organizations to scale, it's also getting very, very easy for attackers to, find more targeted attacks. So in terms of detection and response, like time will tell how it changes. Thus far, when I have tried to catch AI based attacks, only AI is able to catch that, right? Only AI is able
Wow.
to catch AI. It's not that a human can determine if this is an AI who's trying to like attack you or defend against that. But thus far, like from what I've used so far, you are able to identify deep fake attacks. You're able to identify if this is a fake image or not, if it's a fake ID from the attacks that I have seen. But I don't know if the average person will have the sophistication or the awareness that they're supposed to really doubt everything that they see. So it's
Yeah. No,
definitely challenging times.
Yeah, that sounds like a very sophisticated phishing attack, and of course, like a very sophisticated social engineering attack as well. Um, what else do you think would be the impact of AI agents or AI in general on how the threat landscape becomes much larger?
I think like all types of attacks, right? Whether you're attacking an infrastructure or an application, there's a few stages of how you carry out an attack. First, you collect information about like what are my targets, how do I get into them. So the knowledge gathering piece is really easy. Like discovering information is easier. You can just do deep research on OpenAI, you can use Perplexity. Back in the days when you used Google, you could still discover stuff, but it was not as easy because, like, who's gonna read so many links? Stuff might be hidden. So now what I have seen is it's just way easier to do research, right? Go to ChatGPT deep research, type in something,
Correct.
let it run for 10 minutes. It'll tell you the entire encyclopedia about a
Yes.
company or a human. So I think gathering information to target an attack better, it's is getting easier,
Easier.
right? And that makes a ton of difference, right? You can keep brute forcing all day long, but like you only need one successful attempt, right, to get in and
Correct.
then
Yeah.
laterally pivot.
Yeah.
And then from like a defense perspective, I think that there's a lot of innovation in the security space, but I still feel like, putting my CISO hat, you kind of feel lost. There's so many
Really.
tools. It's just overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
10,000 alerts a day. You really don't know what to do. There's not a lot of like proactive things that can genuinely protect you, in my experience. Like I haven't really been a CISO for a couple of years now, but if I put my CISO hat on, I haven't truly seen um even like agentic capabilities or AI really helping you on the proactive side. But definitely like the reactive side, once you've already had intrusion, once you've already had an attempt, that sort of stuff where you're looking at like petabytes of data, I think there's a lot of innovation going there. I actually helped build the Microsoft Security Copilot, which does that, right? Once you're already attacked, you have tons of logs that no human can make sense out of. There's a lot of like security operations centers kind of startups coming up. Google, Microsoft already have really good offerings in that space.
Correct.
So I see in the valley, I see a lot of VC investment going in that space. Like that's, a lot of where the buzz is of like, hey, you always, see these AI SOC companies raise,
Yeah.
hundreds of millions of dollars. But, I personally would love proactive security. I'd love to see innovation in the proactive side rather than, hey, once something's already happened, then how do you recover from it?
Yeah, that's interesting. So, I was actually reading a CISO community report by Bessemer Venture Partners, and that concluded that CISO demand for AI-driven solutions has not yet caught up with the growing number of companies in this space, which is exactly what you alluded to. There's too many companies that are building in this space. And this is because most of the day-to-day items on a security team's agendas go back to basic blocking and tackling initiatives, right? As an AI security founder, how do you look at this? The fact that it has that the market has not caught up yet.
Yeah. I don't see that in our space. What I do see is that there's so much noise because everyone wants to do AI. And as I said, like, right, like doing nothing versus adding some AI, definitely having some AI that is meaningful is gonna be better than just having a clunky system which was built like 20 years ago, right? Because it's just not context aware. It's just like throwing random stuff at you. In most subcategories of security, not, security is also a huge space. So you have various pillars. But, what I have seen is that in this like AI gold rush, all of the products, they just want to add AI. So they still have, the clunky traditional deterministic software that alerts you 10,000 times a day or is not that useful. But but vendors are just adding a layer of AI on top,
Okay.
and it kind of helps you build a, Grammarly. It just helps you
Ah.
to minor things like, hey, if I'm writing something, polish my report, summarize this, help me answer a question. It's just like really basic stuff that
Just incremental solutions,
helps.
essentially.
Yes, exactly. It
Okay.
is not
Okay.
exponentially changing the way a security team can truly leverage generative AI. So I feel that most of the tools today in the market are just like incrementally better because of AI. And if it is incrementally better, um, I mean, firstly, people are just like shipping without even seeing if it's accurate, if it's helpful. They just want to add an AI just so that their product has AI. So those are like either negative or incremental gains. But truly, if somebody builds an AI native system like how Zania is, you can truly change the status quo. If
Awesome.
you don't just add a layer of sprinkle on top, but you truly build an AI worker essentially, whose brain is like a
Yeah.
dynamic thinker like a human is. That's a totally different outcome in 3 years, than it would be if a traditional stack adds AI in 3 years. So I think in 3 to 5 years, even though right now there's a lot of noise, all of that noise can be cut if there's innovative companies that build meaningful products and really rethink of what is possible. They don't have tech debt to maintain. They don't have like, oh my God, I have $100 million in revenue. So I need to support that. I need to support that revenue growth. I cannot just like crash my backend and I can't just build a new system. But if a new company like Zania builds and rethinks from first principles what's possible, I think that's just like crazy. I live in San Francisco. You really have like self-driving cars. Waymo is just like, there's so many Waymos. It would just be crazy to imagine that a human less a driverless car actually roams on the streets of San
Yes.
Francisco, which is a crazy crazy city, right? Like people drive really rash, streets are small, people don't follow the rules. So you can't build a Waymo from like a Toyota, right? Like you can't build an electric engine on top of a coal engine. You really have to think from first principles and use the latest advancements that unlock such a drastically different outcome. So I feel that's what is very exciting. And I feel like we don't see that there's no demand. In fact, like we had one of the fangs, we actually said no to them because we just have so much going on that we're not able to keep up. So I don't see, that there's less demand. If you have the right product, there's, it's just like a rocket ship.
Interesting, interesting. You've also signed a number of new customers at Zania. Some of them include prominent fintechs, GSIs, audit and advisory companies, and I know a bunch of cybersecurity founders will be watching this. So, can you tell us more about your GTM methodology and how you were able to successfully make deals with major enterprise clients?
Yeah, definitely. So, we basically help do the manual work in the risk and compliance space. And for an enterprise, the manual work is either done internally or done externally through, professional services firm. So our AI is replacing that manual work. And thus we make money from both enterprises as well as professional services firms. So we have like really awesome customers both on the enterprise side and professional services side. On the enterprise side, we have customers like Stanford, Blad, Remitly, many others. We have some really exciting customers in procurement as well. And then on the audit advisory side, on the professional services side, we have, Grant Thornton, which is a top audit advisory firm. Armanino, which is also like a top firm. We have, partnerships with GSIs like HCL, TCS as well, which are huge. They give us lots of exposure. So, I think that for us, finding these large clients was a little bit overwhelming initially. But as we started building the right product, it just became easier and easier. And now, once you have a reputation, you have to make a few customers really happy, right? And then they refer other customers. You bring a name of like, hey, this product's awesome. And then it starts flowing in. So it's just a matter of getting started. And then when you get used to it, the next one gets, easier. We have an awesome CRO, Aiden. So a large part of how we've been able to get these customers is because we have an awesome CRO. He was a partner at Bain, PwC, Deloitte, where he sold services, risk and compliance services to really large enterprises. And then he was leading enterprise sales at a legacy risk and compliance company where he sold software to solve these problems to top enterprises. So, we have a really good in the industry, because we've done it, the industry kind of trusts us, but that's not enough. You really need to have an awesome product, right? No one's gonna give you $500,000 or $1 million just because you've been in security and you were a CISO at Microsoft. That's not enough. So, but definitely us being familiar with the space and being industry leaders in the space got us the personal credibility, which when we combined with a great product, has helped us grow.
So in your conversations with these customers, like in your conversations with the CISOs at these companies, what did you get from them in terms of what they believe are the biggest CISO challenges today?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think like the biggest challenge is keeping up, right? There's just too much to do. You never have enough people, you never have enough resources. And especially like recently, companies have gotten really cautious about their, how they spend the money, right? Like everything's just becoming more and more strict in terms of budget and operating the company in a lean way. So I think like from what we hear is one, resourcing is a really big challenge. Two, retaining talent is a really big challenge. So if you have low quality work that even an AI could do, reading thousands of documents, understanding thousands of regulations, doing all of this like mind numbing work is not really helping you retain the talent because you're not giving them things that enrich them. And the smartest people want to solve hard problems, right? They don't want to do dumb stuff. So I think like the biggest challenge remains, hey, how do we get, you know, how do we become a strategic partner to the company
Correct.
without really pouring in, hundreds of people, because you don't have hundreds of smart people. Every company cannot find hundreds of smart people. They're really expensive. There's not even enough of them.
Okay, so from 2023 to 2024, cloud security platforms have attracted massive late-stage funding. The poster child, of course, is Wiz, which is in talks with Google to be acquired, at least for now, for about $32 billion. Um, why did cloud infrastructure security companies become the focus of major investors? And what are some of the things you have learned, like, in the Bay Area, looking at the Wiz journey?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. I think there's a lot to learn from Wiz. I personally feel security is massive, right? Like as I told you, if security was a country, it would be, one of the largest economies in the world. So there's lots of opportunities in security, and security tooling sucks. Pretty much like there's no security product that you'd hear people love except for Wiz. They're all like, this sucks less. I must use this because I have no other choice. So I feel like when the status quo is it sucks and you have a product that people love, automatically it goes viral. So what I personally learned a lot from Airbnb and the Wiz journey is that you need to build products that people love. Having learned from Brian Chesky, who founded Airbnb,
Yes.
I'm used to building products that people love. I want them to feel happy after using the product. For a risk and compliance or a security software, I want them to use it less. I don't want them to use it more, right? If I'm truly making them successful, they need to spend less time doing the work. That would be the measure of success, love, and how much work can we take on from their plate. And this really big CEO was like, why are you building that? Like, security is just dirty laundry, no one wants to do this. This is just like a, sink. Just build something, and at that point, I kind of felt like, am I doing something wrong? But then I was like, no, firstly, as a person, I cannot build things that I personally do not want to use, just because it's dirty laundry or whatever it is, right? I don't really resonate. That doesn't resonate with me. And then having learned from Wiz, right? Like, it's not just build something because you're building something and sure it's the second worst thing that somebody could use so you'll win. But what Wiz and companies like Airbnb have truly taught us is that if you build something that people love, then you'll automatically grow a lot. So I feel like Wiz's journey has, in my mind, is not like just about, hey, cloud security is a hot space, which I'm not sure if it was such a hot space before they actually made this massive, $30 billion. They
Interesting.
had this trajectory. I'm not sure if it's because of the category. I think there's plenty of other categories, risk and compliance. There's, so many categories in security that I feel have the potential to do that. But it's truly their approach of building, a simple product in a complex, fragmented space where you're literally securing a cloud environment where you have servers, you have databases, you have, so many different kinds of assets, and you just have too much attack surface. But they're still related problems. And the way they simplified a small problem and just made it simple, and just made it work. It's just easy. Just make it work. Make it simple, make something that people love and want. I think that's what really helped them grow. Uh,
Interesting. Yeah. You mentioned that, like so many times people's attitude is just like, this sucks, that sucks, and they want to just have a simpler life when it comes to security. I was reading this in a cybersecurity report recently that there's a growing trend among major players in the cybersecurity industry where they're increasingly turning to product-only acquisitions to build comprehensive platforms, and we're witnessing this platformization, where essentially instead of having to work with 10 different solutions, CISOs can just have like multiple of them in just one platform. So, how do you look at that platformization trend?
so I think that thus far, a platform was essentially multiple disjointed products slapped into one
One.
offering, either as a sales package or at best you have a UI layer with all these different engines that don't understand anything. That's not how a human works, right? A security engineer knows at a Microsoft where are the servers, where are the humans, what is the role of technology, where is the people process technology, what are the control mechanisms, what are the defenses. But when you slap these disjointed products together, which are in themselves clunky and really noisy, you're just multiplying that factor but making it easier to consume that noise. I feel that now I just don't see that approach winning in the next 5 years. If you just put like five, clunky things together, you don't get 5x. It's not like 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 is becoming five. It's really just becoming a two. But I feel if you truly build it natively using a smart engine like an AI agent, the AI agentic architecture makes it such that you can truly have 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 as 50, not like a two. Just because like each of these agents can work together into orchestrating a workflow that can truly be a force multiplier. So I feel like thus far, all of the acquisitions that happen, either like Palo Alto Networks or like all of these companies acquiring other security companies for 100, 200 million. That was a great path for them to grow and expand their offerings by
Correct.
accumulating these products. But I feel, in the future, like I just feel like there's a much better way to build a platform rather than acquiring these disjointed products and slapping them together.
Interesting. I kind of want to go back to another fascinating question, which is about acquisitions. We've seen the largest, cyber acquisitions that are about to happen in history. Splunk was acquired by Cisco. SecureWorks was, Sophos was acquired by SecureWorks. What, in your view, does it take for a cybersecurity company to be on the radar of strategic buyers? I know you have already received some offers. So, what does it take to create a cybersecurity company that is acquirable?
Yeah. So that's like a really interesting question. And, exiting for hundreds of millions of dollars is like really, really common for security companies because,
Correct.
as I mentioned, right, like security is a huge space with so many verticals. If you look up security acronyms, you'll just like get exhausted. The list won't get over. CNAP, SNAP, MDR, XDR, like your mind will just get numb. You won't even I don't understand all of the acronyms. It's just too overwhelming. So for a larger player like a Palo Alto Networks or a Microsoft, any of these guys, acquiring a company for a few $100 million with the product that works, like it has the product, it is enough of a product that it works and can be combined into an offering with other products, that just helps these bigger players get, one, retention, because, somebody who doesn't offer a platform is inherently, at a little bit of a disadvantage because it's like, oh,
Fair.
like this other product can do XYZ, but you can only do X, right? So that was like a, good way for them to retain and attract new customers and, increase revenue as well. So I think like what I have seen from my friends is that if they've had like a few $1 million in revenue, doesn't have to be crazy, like less than between $2 and $10 million of revenue, which is not that hard. Because if you sell to an enterprise, the contracts are inherently hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, right? So getting to like a $5 million in ARR is not that hard if you sell to an enterprise. Let's say every enterprise gives you 100K, you don't need as many, right? It's easily doable in a few years. So security, I think there's many founders who follow that approach, and it's great, right? You make good money. It's not that much time. It's fairly like a success mantra to earn good money. Like it's a win-win for the market. So from what it takes, I just think like you just need to build something that works and people want. You can even like copy an existing product that works, sell it for cheaper, build a different flavor, build the same flavor. I've seen that as well. Have like a few $1 million in revenue, and you can get an acquisition offer from what I have seen.
So, Shruti, you're living the life many dream of. Can you take us through your journey of how you went from being this girl living in Noida to move to the US for her master's at Georgia Tech, and now finally a cybersecurity founder in the Valley? Help us understand, what that journey was like, how you picked what to study at Georgia Tech, and how did you plan your life in a way that, has gotten you to where you are right now?
Yeah, definitely. That's like a really interesting journey. So, I was always a hardworking kid. I worked hard in my, 10th, 11th, 12th, whatever. I was, a sports person. And I felt like, not always you work hard and you get something. So earlier on in my, in my journey when I was in India, I studied really hard, but I couldn't get into a tier one college. And, I just felt like I felt a little bit disheartened because I worked so hard and I saw other people who did not work so hard. I just put so much pressure on myself. And then when it came time to, apply for US universities, I did not put so much pressure on myself. I just took it by, just play it by the ear, how it goes. And that was like, I did not have the pressure and I got into Georgia Tech, which is one of the top US universities, right? And I
Yes.
studied like
Yes.
computer
Yeah.
science,
Yeah.
specialized in information security at Georgia Tech. I did that because I was really fascinated by security. I mean, back in the days, this was like 15 years ago, right? Security wasn't really a thing.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
didn't study security. You didn't really
Which is
have
why
a
I asked you
security
this
job.
question. Yeah, which is why I asked you
Yeah.
this question. Yeah, 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 yeah.
So back in the day, also, I was just like a fascinated kid, right? I was like, wow, wouldn't it be cool if I hacked into everything? That would make me feel so powerful if I could get access to
Wow.
things that others would not be able to. So that's what fascinated me towards security, and I applied at Georgia Tech. I studied security, computer science, and that was just like a really difficult experience for me. Firstly,
Really?
I had never lived away from my family ever. I wasn't in a hostel or anything. So firstly, physically being away and living alone was so difficult. And I had like, my dog passed away. Like it was just like really emotionally difficult for me to be at Georgia Tech. And then was really hard. I was not really smart, and I had all these like crazy people in my class. I like they were just like they had worked already. I was a new grad. There was just like a lot for me to learn. And at Georgia Tech, I was in the first couple of months, I was doing really bad. Like I was almost like the second worst, grade wise in my
That
class.
that's hard to believe.
No, really,
It's
it
really
was
hard
like
to believe.
really bad. And then I was like, wow, this sucks. Should I just like quit Georgia Tech, go to India? Like, what's going on? I'm like really dumb. I don't know what to do. And then I decided that screw it, I'm just gonna work harder than anyone else. And then I worked so hard in my time at Georgia Tech every day, including Saturdays and Sundays. I would study all night. I studied every day till 7:15 a.m. I very well remember I would just drink a Red Bull, have an all-nighter,
Classic.
um, and
Yeah.
study till 7:15 a.m. Then I'd go home, I would sleep, and then 9 o'clock was my next class. My class. So I would wake up literally 10 minutes before the class, run to my class, attend the lecture. I would probably not understand what the professor was teaching. So I'd go back, watch the lecture again 5 times, really like think from first principles. And I was a teaching assistant as well, and I was a TA of a very tough class. So in a couple of months, following this crazy, disciplined approach got me to be the second in the class. And at that point, I very well knew I'd strategized, how to get awesome grades and how to learn. I very well knew the formula of, okay, what can I do to. The first one was like too smart. I could not beat him, but I could come second. And
Interesting.
that was like a really life-changing experience for me, not in terms of just knowledge, but the way it helped me build my resilience of no matter what, I can figure it out. I'm not gonna give up, and no matter what it is, it's nuclear science, whatever science it is, I can figure it out. I have the critical thinking to understand any concept in the world. And I feel that's the experience that has helped me the most at Zania. After that, when I was at an Airbnb Brex, in like 1 year, when I had the reputation, it was quite trivial for me to find the next best job. I always had recruiters knocking my doors. They were begging me, at one of the companies. They were just like, you can tell me your salary. I literally would tell people how much
Wow.
salary I need. And I would just say no. Like even when I was joining Microsoft, I had crazy offers. So that was not that hard. Like it was just obviously it's work, you're a CISO, it's work, but it's not something that really tests you. But when I started Zania, it just felt like I was almost building my career from zero again.
Really?
And yeah, I mean,
Why
it
do you
was
think
not
that?
easy. Because building something from zero is really hard. You're not like sure, like you were a CISO before, but like no one cares that much. They'll respect you, but it's not something that gives you a lot of advantage as compared to,
Really?
someone who's not built it. It was so much struggle to figure out what we are building, who we are building it for,
Okay.
exactly how does it come together. Just a lot of struggles, like bad
Yeah.
employees, bad VCs, all sorts of problems that you'd face in a
Yeah.
company. And
Yeah.
what I realized was that I always like look back. I was like, okay, I mean, if I could get from this girl in Noida to, being the CISO of Microsoft Identity, leading AI
Yes.
at Microsoft, I can do anything. All I need to do is I just need to not get killed. I don't need to give up. I have to live to die another day. A founder once told me you have to just live to die another day. So all I aspired for, I have to just live today to die
Yeah.
another day. And I would have really bad days. Like some days would be so horrible that
Yes.
I'd like really feel like, why am I even doing this? I have a young daughter. So
Yes.
a lot of times I feel like, hey, I started this company when my daughter was 1 year old, and you want to really enjoy those moments. And
Be there for
I
the child.
gave up a
Yes.
lot of that. right? But I just feel like, my mantra is, live to die another day,
You did mention how India's changed drastically. Like there's a certain kind of environment, a certain kind of ecosystem that's taking shape in India as well. As a cybersecurity founder, as a deep tech founder, how different, according to you, is building deep tech solutions in the US versus India?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we have some of our team in India as well. I think like one of the core um challenges that I have seen is like the cultural mindset of you know product thinking or putting yourselves in the shoes of the customers. I think like that's just like inherent in the companies I worked at. You're supposed to have like a certain level of autonomy. Like you're supposed to have not need so much, like it's not appreciated a top-down hierarchy in SF, especially in the companies I worked at. And that goes both ways, right? Like employers or a manager would expect you to do a task independently to a certain extent. Even if you're a new grad, you're expected to not like, uh, not be a coder. You're supposed to, own more, have more autonomy. And also, like, employees expect their employers to give them autonomy. Whereas I feel like in India, probably because of the nature of the organizational structure or maybe the kind of work that people outsource in India, I feel like that product thinking is, a little bit lacking. You need to, I've seen like people run a very like top down kind of a company rather than a bottoms up kind of a company. So from like a deep tech perspective, I mean, I'm not sure. I don't have too many friends building in India, but I feel like one of the things that you really need to build a cutting edge product or a company is that you need people who are really smart, really curious. You need
Yeah.
people who want to not, they're like they're putting themselves in the shoes of the customer, the researcher, and they're bringing it all together. It's hard to have like a traditional sort of like a software engineering factory to build an innovative,
Yeah.
LLM, right? Like you just need um, you need, people who are smart, who can think by themselves, and they need a vision, but they're more um they're more autonomous themselves. So
Fair,
I'm not
fair,
sure
fair.
like if the I have limited experience, but what I have seen is that uh like other companies or a lot of my friends, they need to run like a top down kind of a engineering team for the team to be successful, and people are used to that structure. They are used to having some QA will do my test, whereas like in the companies I worked at, we didn't even have a QA. You're supposed to QA your own work. Like, why does somebody else test your work, right? So I feel there's some cultural differences that way between the companies I've worked at in the Valley and, the way other companies are being run in India.
Interesting, interesting. So for someone who's looking to enter this field, maybe an engineer or a builder, what are some steps you would recommend to them to truly understand and contribute in cybersecurity today?
Definitely. I think like the number one skill today is smarts and curiosity, because AI has gotten so good and it's just like becoming, crazy better every month. I think like the biggest skill that really helps you differentiate and be an awesome engineer is the curiosity, the mindset of, okay, I really need to learn. Hey, what's next? What's like the best AI tool? What's like, how can I solve this problem better? Hey, like, hey, how can I get feedback from even a chat GPT? Am I thinking about this right? Just like really a curious mindset, I feel. And skills are important too, but I feel they're like a little less so important because you always, you have better access to information and, a pair programmer to you, right? So I think definitely not, not needing so much hand holding, really thinking from the lens of what the customer wants, what problem are you trying to solve, and being curious about the technology. Because I think in
Interesting.
a year from now, the engineers that don't think like that or don't have product thinking or don't really use AI, they're just not going to be needed. Why do you need an AI, right? Like a couple of weeks ago, I was building an app on a Sunday, literally in 30 minutes without writing a
Yes.
single line of code. I built a good app, like it was a
What
fully
did you
functioning app.
what tool did you use? What tool did you use?
I used Lovable, and
Lovable. Okay.
you know, just like it
Yeah.
was just crazy to me how it made such a greatly designed app.
Wow.
It looked beautiful, it worked well, it had, it
Hmm.
had AI. It was just like really awesome.
Hmm.
So like, I mean, imagine this is just like beginning of coding agents, right? In a year from now, um, I just don't think you need an engineer to write like dumb code, variable A is equal to B plus Z or whatever, right? You don't need that low level work. When AI can do that, you need a smart person to run the AI. And if you're not on top of the latest technology, if you don't really understand critically how you're building a system, you won't need engineers like that, right? And the sad part is that a lot of engineers are like that, especially in India. I
Correct.
just think like, um, a lot of companies just give this like, grunt work to Indian engineers. And I've
Yeah.
spoken
Yeah.
to so much of them, so many of them. They may not have the curiosity, but I think this is like, the time if you really want to, even
Yeah.
have a job in the next few years. It's like
Yeah.
a wake up call.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to understand from you, like, in the cybersecurity industry, for anyone who's looking to build right now, where's the non-obvious upside? What areas of cybersecurity or compliance are being overlooked by both founders and VCs? Um, what's missing that someone should be looking to build right now?
Yeah, definitely. So I think that security in general is a very, very crowded space. And in general, I truly believe in building something that people will love, which there's not a lot of. So I think that anyone who builds a security product that people can love is, definitely goes a long way, irrespective of the domain. But certain domains are like less mature than others, right? For example, the space that we are building in risk and compliance, there's no product that is truly solving the problem. They're just like trackers of tasks, right? They're not really helping you automate the work as much as just like tracking the work. And it's a boring space. One VC told me once that the more boring the space is, the better, because one, your customers don't want to deal with it. Two, other founders don't want to deal with it. So I've been told by a few, VCs or founders that the best way to uh, you know, uh, you know, go higher in the valuation chain is you build something that's boring, or solve for a boring problem. And I feel like we are solving for a very boring problem. No one wants to deal with it. Um, so I think like risk and compliance for sure. I haven't seen too much innovation in the privacy space. I have not seen a lot of innovation in like the proactive security space as much on the application security side. There's some, but like just like noisy tools that, people can't scale up to. I think what's
Interesting.
really funded or like a really crowded space is the cloud security space. There's lots of,
Yes.
tools that have raised hundreds of millions of dollars. There's lots of competition in this space. The new AI SOC space, which is like, how do you respond to incidents? How do you look at petabytes of logs and make sense out of them? That's become a really competitive space. Like lots of VCs have invested hundreds of millions of dollars in that. So if I was personally starting off, I would not start in either of those spaces. I would not make a cloud security company or a SOC company, not because they're not important problems, but am I like, is that the, like in an already crowded market, I'm not personally attached to those problems. So there's easier ways to build a company.
Yeah, and building successful companies, especially in tech, is all about defensibility. And I know you've alluded to how you picked up on first principles and first principles thinking when you were in college. Can you start by telling us what is your understanding of first principles and how do you apply that to how you think about defensibility?
Yeah, definitely. So what we are building is like a really hard problem to solve, in the sense that firstly, the accuracy and the quality of the AI really matters. This is not like a, Chat GPT 4 mini that any answer would be helpful, right? Like you need to hit a certain level of accuracy so that a top class risk and compliance professional can trust you. There can be, if our AI hallucinates or like gives answers in a wrong way and makes a certain decision, even like the CEO could go to jail, right? So
Yeah,
the
yeah.
quality in our space really, really matters. And our focus has been that the defensibility is having, really high accuracy. Apart from like great product experience, that's obviously a key part of it, but the accuracy needs to be really, really high. And luckily, I have worked with like the best researchers in my life. I've lived this problem, so I exactly know what does this problem look like. How do you solve this problem as the world's best human? How does the world's best human solve this problem manually? And I
That's
I
truly first
personally have
principles. Yes.
used, yeah, and I've
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
used
yeah.
all the tools in the market. So I know how they solve the problem and why they are not solving it good enough. And I've also built, world scale AI systems. So I also know, you know, I'm also like, familiar with how the underlying models work. How can you build these Lego blocks together to solve a security problem, right? So in terms of defensibility, thinking from first principles, because I've done the work, I know the problem, and I also have built AI products. All I need to do is bring both of those together in my mind to, uh, you know, uh, uh, come together as a product and solve these problems. And then obviously you keep iterating with customers, right? Ultimately,
Yeah.
they tell you if it works or not. So we have like a really sophisticated multi-agent architecture that can scale to solve, um, pretty much most of the risk and compliance problems. And we've built this architecture because of my learnings at Microsoft and before that. I think that's our defensibility, right? And the AI gets smarter every time with every customer, with every point of feedback, with every new piece of data that we create our models on. It just creates a networking effect and makes the AI smarter. And at the end of the day, it's not a one-time thing, right? You need to keep working hard every day. You need to get smarter. You need to adopt newer technology. You need to take feedback from customers, and you need to, keep going. I feel like
Interesting.
execution is in the end the best defensibility, right? If you can move
Hmm.
faster than anyone else, if you can build the best product, if you can keep executing, like that's eventually what adds up and makes you climb, this big mountain.
Interesting, interesting. So my last question would probably be about, so for those who are looking to build in cybersecurity right now, what are some crucial sources that they should be looking at right now in order to build better?
What I have, learned from other, fellow founders and, even YC teaches this is that
Yeah.
don't build in isolation. Like first figure out what problem you're solving and why you're solving the problem. It needs to be a problem. And
Yes.
Sequoia has like a really good blog in which they break down the problem types, what problem are you solving? Is it like a problem, an existing problem? Do people know if you truly have a problem? There's like a really good
Yes.
matrix to
Yeah.
think about it. So the first thing is to think about what your problem you're solving. And you may not know, you may think like, oh, these are 5 problems. I could solve any because in the end, I want to solve a problem, but I'm not fixated on a problem. And then validate it with customers, right? These days,
Yeah.
tools like Lovable, Cursor, etc., depending on how much you want to put in, it's fairly easy to build a prototype. It's literally like faster than ever to put your thoughts into a prototyped product or a design that you can show to customers, right? So start there, don't just jump on to I have to build something and I'll build something like crazy. Prototype your idea, talk to customers. If you think you're not even able to get to customers, that's a serious problem, right? Like
Yes.
if you're not getting that feedback, how will you build something in isolation if they are
Yeah.
not even willing to give you the time? So you need to
Yeah.
find not like 100 customers if you can't find them, but at least like 4 or 5 of them to be like, oh, this is a real problem, and can you truly solve this problem? And how will you go about solving the problem? And then it's just like cyclic execution, right? Keep executing, building, selling more. What helped Zania a lot was that we tried to earn revenue from day zero, which was a really hard spot to be in.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
we took up an extra challenge of, okay, we're gonna, bootstrap our company from revenue from day zero. So we're not just gonna like, burn $100 million or 10 million or whatever, and then be like, oh, like now we know what to build.
Yeah.
From day zero, we found customers who found what Zania was doing for them valuable enough to pay us some money. If it's like 10K, 20K, whatever it is, right? Just get started. And
Okay.
what you can do is you can tell them that, hey, if I solve this problem for you, we just want to make sure you have skin in the game too. So can you like, can you give us 10K, which is like not a lot, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you can
yeah.
even
Yeah.
say, that if I don't solve it, I'm gonna give it back to you. But this is just to make sure you have skin in the game too. So we got like
Interesting.
a few of those customers,
Yeah.
um, and that helped us learn a lot, not in terms of the
Mm.
problem itself, but also
Mm.
like how to build a product from 0 to 1, right? How to build
Yeah.
something that a lot of people are using frequently, build the foundational architecture for your application. And then we just kept iterating, both from a product perspective, problem perspective, as well as from an engineering perspective.
Awesome, awesome. Shruti, thanks so much for being on the show. It's been it's been a rich discussion. I look forward to having you again on the show.
Thank you so much, Ayam. It was a really fun chat.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.